My daughter arrived carrying a leather folder and speaking in the slow, careful voice people use when they think you've become fragile. She said the paperwork would make things easier later. Easier for who? She never explained. I sat quietly at my kitchen table, adjusted my glasses, and signed every page she placed in front of me. The entire time, she never noticed the second folder resting beside my coffee cup. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Been in the same brick house since 1981. My husband Frank built the back deck himself before his knees gave out, and after he died 6 years ago, I kept everything mostly the same. Same curtains, same dishes, same coffee tin above the stove. My daughter Melissa used to say the place smelled like cinnamon and old books. That morning, though, she barely looked around the kitchen. She kept checking her phone while I signed. "You're making the smart choice here, Mom," she said. Honestly, this takes a huge weight off everybody. Everybody. That word stayed with me. My grandson Tyler was sitting in the living room, scrolling on his tablet loud enough for me to hear explosions coming from the speakers. 17 years old and already talking to me like I was a burden every time he visited. Melissa stacked the papers neatly after I finished. "There," she said with a relieved smile. "Now we won't have to worry if something happens." I folded my hands together and nodded softly, like I hadn't spent 32 years working payroll administration for the county courthouse. Like I didn't know exactly what a property transfer looked like. The papers she brought transferred my house into a family trust controlled by her and her husband, Brent. What she did not know was that the second folder beside my coffee cup contained certified copies from my attorney filed 3 days earlier. Different trust, different beneficiaries, different ownership structure entirely. By the time Melissa arrived that morning, the house no longer legally belonged to me, or to her. I asked if she wanted coffee. "No, we can't stay long," she said quickly. "Brent's waiting in the truck." That told me everything. Brent never came inside anymore unless he needed something. Last Thanksgiving, he spent 20 minutes explaining to me how expensive Tyler's private baseball program was, while staring directly at my wedding china cabinet. I stood slowly and walked them to the door. Melissa kissed my cheek distractedly. "You did the right thing," she whispered. I smiled at her. "I know." After they left, I stood at the window watching Brent climb out of the truck before they even backed out of the driveway. He looked excited. Melissa handed him the folder and he actually laughed. I sat back down at the kitchen table and opened my own folder again. The attorney's card rested on top beside a yellow sticky note in his handwriting. "Dorothy, call me immediately if your daughter contacts you again regarding the property." I stared at that note for a long time, because 2 weeks earlier, my bank manager had called me privately after Melissa tried gaining access to my accounts, claiming I was having memory problems. That was the moment everything changed. At first, I told myself there had to be some misunderstanding. Then I remembered the dinner 3 months earlier. Melissa pouring wine for everybody except me because she said alcohol interfered with senior medication. I remembered Brent correcting me in front of people when I repeated a story. I remembered Tyler joking that they'd probably have me in assisted living by Christmas. Little comments, tiny humiliations, testing the ground beneath my feet. I should have seen it sooner. That afternoon, my phone rang around 4. "Melissa." I let it ring twice before answering. "Well," she said immediately, "did you tell the bank yet?" The bank. About me helping manage things now. Her voice sounded impatient already. I looked out my kitchen window toward Frank's old garden, dead tomato vines bending in the wind. I haven't yet, I said carefully. A long silence. Then her tone changed completely. Sharp. Cold. Mom, you need to stop making this difficult. Melissa didn't raise her voice right away. That was the thing about her. She knew how to sound reasonable while saying ugly things. I'm not making anything difficult, I told her. You haven't contacted the bank. Brent checked. That caught my attention. I stayed quiet a second too long. Why would Brent check my accounts? I asked. Another pause. Then she sighed hard into the phone like I was exhausting her. Mom, because we're trying to protect you. Protect me. I sat there staring at the chipped corner of my kitchen table where Frank dropped a wrench sometime around 1994. I've handled my finances just fine for 50 years, I said softly. That's not what people are saying. My stomach tightened. What people? You've been confused lately. You repeat stories. You forget appointments. I actually laughed a little then. Couldn't help it. I forgot one dentist appointment in February. You left the stove on last month. The burner was warm because I made soup. Her silence told me she already knew that. Then came the sentence that stayed with me afterward. Mom, don't make us do this the hard way. Us, not her. Them. I hung up without another word. About 20 minutes later, my attorney called back after seeing my missed message. His name was Harold Benton, 74 years old himself, slow talker, careful man. After I explained the phone call, he went quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, Dorothy, has your daughter mentioned competency evaluations yet? The room suddenly felt cold. No. She may. I gripped the phone tighter. Harold explained it calmly. Adult children sometimes petition courts claiming elderly parents can no longer safely manage finances or property. Usually it happens after medical incidents, dementia, hospitalizations, cognitive decline. But sometimes, he said carefully, it happens because there's money involved. I looked toward the hallway where family pictures still lined the wall. Melissa at 12 holding her science fair ribbon. Melissa at 16 crying before prom because she hated her hair. Melissa sitting beside Frank in his hospital room 2 days before he died. I felt sick. You think my daughter would try that? I think, Harold said gently, you need to stop underestimating what desperate people do under financial pressure. That evening, I barely ate dinner. Around 8:30, somebody knocked on my front door. Not Melissa. Tyler. He stood there with his hood up and his hands shoved in his pockets. You alone? He asked. I nodded slowly. He came inside without waiting. The smell of cigarette smoke followed him in. Not his. Probably Brent's truck. Tyler paced around my living room awkwardly before finally blurting out, Mom's freaking out. I stayed quiet. She said you're being manipulated by lawyers. That almost made me smile. Did she? He nodded. Then he looked at me differently than usual. Nervous. She also said if you don't cooperate, things are gonna get ugly. The way he said it bothered me more than the words themselves, like he'd heard arguments already happening behind closed doors. I asked him if his parents were having money trouble. He looked away immediately. That answered it. After a minute, he muttered, Dad lost a lot. How much? I don't know exactly. But he did know. His jaw tightened. The house is behind. I felt something heavy settle inside my chest then. Not shock anymore, just sadness. Tyler sat down finally, elbows on his knees. She keeps saying the house was supposed to save us. Save us. Not save her. Not help her. Save them. I looked at my grandson carefully. He still had softness in him despite everything. Still looked guilty standing in my living room. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. She already told people you're slipping mentally. I didn't answer. She told Aunt Denise you forgot where you parked and started crying. That never happened. I know. The room went completely silent. Then Tyler reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out folded papers. I wasn't supposed to take these, he said quietly. My hands trembled when I opened them. Printed emails, guardianship consultation, asset review, medical capacity assessment, and at the bottom of one page, Brent had written 3 words in blue ink. Move quickly now. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Frank's old recliner with those printed emails spread across my lap until almost 3 a.m. Every few minutes, I'd pick them up again, hoping maybe I misunderstood something, but there wasn't much to misunderstand. Guardianship, capacity assessment, asset review. They were building a case against me. I kept hearing Melissa's voice from years ago, 15 years old, crying after her first breakup. Mom, nobody's ever gonna love me the way you do. And now she was discussing legal options to take control of my life before I was even in the ground. At 7:10 the next morning, I called Harold. He listened quietly while I read portions of the emails aloud. Then he asked, "Did your grandson willingly give these to you?" "Yes." "Good. Keep originals safe. Do not mention them to your daughter." His voice changed after that, more serious than before. "Dorothy, this has moved beyond pressure. They're preparing documentation." I stared at the steam rising from my untouched coffee. "What happens if they file something?" "You'll need evidence of competency, medical evaluations, witnesses, financial records." He paused. "And you'll need to understand something difficult." "What's that?" "Once people begin this process, they rarely back away voluntarily." I closed my eyes. Outside, a garbage truck rattled slowly down my street. Normal morning sounds, normal world. Meanwhile, my own daughter was preparing to tell a court I couldn't manage my own mind. Harold scheduled an emergency meeting for that afternoon. Before I left, I gathered everything carefully. The fake trust documents Melissa brought, the emails Tyler stole, my banking records, notes I'd started writing after strange conversations over the last 6 months. There were more than I realized. Melissa insisting I stop driving after I scraped a mailbox. Brent asking detailed questions about my investments during Christmas dinner. Tyler joking that I'd leave this place feet first anyway. At Harold's office, things became even uglier. He reviewed the papers quietly while his assistant made copies. Then he asked me a question I wasn't prepared for. "Has anyone besides your daughter recently questioned your memory?" I frowned. "My doctor asked odd questions during my last appointment." Harold leaned back slowly. "Did your daughter arrange that appointment?" "Yes." His expression hardened immediately. "Dorothy, you need to request your medical records today." My chest tightened. "You think she contacted my doctor?" "I think people laying legal groundwork often create paper trails first." I suddenly remembered that appointment perfectly. Dr. Abrams, unusually formal, asking if I ever became disoriented, whether I forgot medications, whether family members expressed concern. At the time, it felt strange. Now it felt terrifying. Harold spent the next hour helping me prepare affidavits and documentation, proving independent living, financial competence, and existing estate arrangements. The whole thing felt unreal, like preparing for a war I never agreed to fight. When I finally returned home around 5, Brent's truck was parked in my driveway. My stomach dropped immediately. Melissa stood on my porch with her arms crossed. Brent stayed near the truck watching. The second I stepped out of my car, Melissa walked toward me fast. "Why are you talking to lawyers?" she demanded. I froze. For one terrible second, I looked directly at Brent. Big mistake, because he smiled. Not friendly, certain, like a man who thought he already owned something. "I'm allowed to speak with attorneys," I said carefully. Melissa stepped closer. "You're making us look like criminals." Us again. I unlocked my front door slowly, but she followed me inside before I could stop her. Brent came in too. That's when I noticed Tyler wasn't with them. Melissa immediately spotted the missing papers on my dining table. Her face changed instantly. "Where did you get those?" I said nothing. Brent grabbed one before I could stop him. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Then Melissa turned pale. "Tyler," she whispered. Brent slammed the papers back onto the table hard enough to shake my lamp. "That little idiot," he snapped, and right there in my living room, I saw it. Not concern, not love. Panic. Melissa started crying first. Not real crying, fast crying. The kind that arrives too quickly, like flipping on a faucet. "You went through our private documents," she said, staring at me like I had betrayed her. I almost laughed from the shock of it. "Private documents," I repeated quietly. "You're discussing taking me to court." Brent stepped forward immediately. "Nobody's taking anybody to court," he said sharply. "You're overreacting." But his eyes kept moving toward the papers, toward Harold's notes, toward the legal folder sitting open beside my purse. That smile he wore outside was gone now. Melissa wiped under her eyes angrily. "You had no right dragging lawyers into this." "I dragged lawyers into this?" I asked. My voice stayed calm somehow, calm enough that it seemed to make her even angrier. "You tried getting access to my bank accounts. That was for protection. You contacted my doctor. You're twisting things. You prepared guardianship paperwork." Brent cut in immediately. "Nothing was filed." That sentence landed hard. Not, "We didn't do it." Not, "It isn't true." Nothing was filed. Yet. The room went very quiet after that. I looked at Melissa carefully. Really looked at her. Dark circles under her eyes. Nervous hands. Jaw clenched tight enough to ache. Fear. Not of losing me. Of losing something else. Finally, I asked the question I should have asked months ago. "How bad is it?" Neither answered. "How much debt are you in?" Melissa looked away first. Brent answered instead. "Things got tight." "Tight," I repeated softly. He sighed hard and rubbed both hands over his face. "The restaurant failed." That surprised me. Brent invested in a sports bar almost 2 years earlier. He bragged about it constantly at family dinners. Said it was going to change everything. Apparently it had. Just not the way he planned. "How much?" I asked again. This time Melissa whispered it. 400,000. I honestly thought I misheard her. My knees nearly gave out. They were behind on the house, behind on loans, behind on taxes, and somewhere in the middle of drowning, they looked at me and saw a lifeboat. Not a mother, not a grandmother, an asset. Brent started talking fast after that. explaining, justifying, saying they panicked, saying they only needed temporary control, saying once the property transferred, they could refinance everything and stabilize. Then came the part that finally broke something inside me. Melissa looked directly at me and said, "You were going to leave it to me, eventually, anyway." Eventually. Like my death was an inconvenient scheduling issue. I stared at my daughter for a long time. Then I walked slowly to the hallway table and picked up the second folder. The real one. Harold prepared it days earlier after I first became suspicious. Melissa frowned immediately. "What's that?" I opened the folder carefully and laid the papers on the dining table between us. Brent reached them first. I watched the color leave his face line by line. Irrevocable trust. Property ownership transferred. Beneficiaries designated. Control assigned elsewhere entirely. Melissa grabbed the pages from him. "What is this?" she whispered. I answered calmly. "The house no longer belongs to me." Silence. "I transferred it 3 days before you brought your paperwork." Melissa looked up slowly. "To who?" I folded my hands together. "Not you." Brent exploded first. "What the hell did you do?" I didn't even flinch. The property, my savings, and Frank's investments were moved into a protected trust managed by my attorney and the county charitable foundation. Melissa looked physically sick. "You gave our family home away?" "No," I said quietly. "I protected it." Brent slammed his fist onto the table so hard my coffee cups rattled. "You spiteful old woman." Melissa burst into tears again. Real ones this time. "You chose strangers over us." I looked directly at her. "No, Melissa. I chose people who weren't waiting for me to become incompetent." That hit her harder than yelling would have. She sat down slowly, like her legs stopped working. Then Brent said something that made the entire room freeze. "You think this protects you?" he said quietly. "You have no idea what's already been set in motion." And for the first time since all this began, I felt afraid. Brent stood there breathing hard, one hand still flat against my dining table. Melissa looked back and forth between us like she suddenly realized she no longer understood the room she was standing in. "What does that mean?" I asked quietly. Brent smiled then, not angry anymore, confident. "You think moving assets changes what's already documented," he said. "We've spent months building evidence." Melissa whispered, "Brent," but he kept going. "Your doctor's statements, witness accounts, financial concerns, your confusion episodes." He shrugged slightly. "Courts don't like elderly people making irrational decisions under pressure." I felt cold all over. Confusion episodes. He said it like they already existed officially somewhere. "That's a lie," I said. "Maybe," Brent replied. "Maybe not." Melissa finally spoke up. "We weren't trying to hurt you." I looked at her, then at the papers still trembling in her hands. "You prepared to take my home while I was still alive." Tears rolled down her face. We were desperate. And I was convenient. That silence afterward hurt more than the shouting, because nobody denied it. Then my phone rang. "Harold," I answered immediately. His voice sounded tense. "Dorothy, are they there right now?" "Yes. I just received notice a petition was electronically filed 40 minutes ago." Everything inside me stopped. Melissa's eyes widened instantly. Brent said nothing. Harold continued carefully. "Emergency temporary guardianship request. They're claiming diminished cognitive capacity and financial instability." I stared directly at my daughter while he spoke. She couldn't even hold my gaze anymore. "They filed it today?" I whispered. Yes. My knees weakened so suddenly I had to grip the counter edge. Harold kept talking, but I barely heard him after the next sentence. There's more. Your physician submitted supporting concerns this morning. I closed my eyes. That appointment, the questions, the notes, it was already arranged months ago. Brent finally spoke again, calmer now. If you cooperate, this doesn't have to get ugly. I slowly lowered the phone from my ear. Melissa started crying harder. Mom, please, just let us fix this. Fix this. I looked around my kitchen. Frank's old clock ticking beside the refrigerator. The curtains I hemmed myself in 1987. The little crack in the ceiling above the sink we never repaired because Frank said it gave the house character. And standing inside all those memories were two people waiting for a judge to declare me incapable of owning my own life. Then headlights swept across the front windows. A car pulled into my driveway hard and fast. Brent turned immediately toward the door. So did Melissa. 3 heavy knocks hit the front door. Then Tyler's voice shouted from outside, Grandma, don't open it for them. Brent's entire face changed, and that's when I realized my grandson had done something worse than steal emails. Some stories end quietly, but the damage stays with people for years. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment below and subscribe for more real emotional stories like this one.